Okay. All right, guys, welcome back to the Good Stuff Podcast. Today we're talking title. I don't know. We met bold.
Oh, gosh.
9 years, 10 years?
10 years ago. I mean, 2012, probably 2013.
Yep.
Yeah, 10 years.
So 10 years. So known him a long time, reconnected recently, and really got to know him better lately. So we're going to talk about title. Title is one of those things that most of the time in real estate, people don't really seem to have a good idea. So I thought the owner of a title company could help us out. So I'll let you introduce yourself, sir.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Chris Hamilton, owner of Heart of Gold Title. Very happy to be here and talk a little bit about the unsexy part of real estate, title.
Yes. So if you had to explain title in a sentence.
Oh boy, it'd be a run-on one for sure. So it's protecting the biggest investment you're ever going to make in your life is how I would probably say it in one sentence. To try to summarize it a little bit, because most consumers don't have a clue what title insurance is or what we do. Different than other insurances because it's a one-time cost, not a renewal thing. And it is there to protect your biggest investment, which is your home purchase. So what that entails is essentially we're going to make sure that property never gets taken away from you, because that's the side of it a lot of people don't know, the ugly side of it. Without title insurance, there can be a dispute that came up 40 years ago over who actually had rights to the ownership of that property when or so-and-so died. They can come and take that property from you that you legally own without title insurance if that is what they decide. And same thing with a prior mortgage. Somebody could have owned that property 30 years ago, not paid off a mortgage, not paid off a child support lien, whatever it may have been. That lien holder can come and foreclose and take your home. So essentially, again, long run on of things, but you're protecting that biggest investment to make sure it never gets taken away from you, because it can, and even in a scenario, if it doesn't get taken away from you, you could accumulate someone else's debt. And I think that's a huge thing that people don't realize about real estate is it's not like a credit card thing necessarily that's going to follow you around. Once a lien is filed, it attaches to the home.
Yep.
So it's there for the next person to inherit, essentially, unless it's going to be paid off, cleared, taken care of. So we're making sure that investment is always going to be protected and insured. So if anything did come up, you're not going to lose your house. You're not going to have to hire an attorney and spend
because it does
hundreds
happen,
of
right?
Yeah, it definitely does happen. I always refer to the boring historical lesson. Abraham Lincoln lost 2 childhood homes because of title defects, actually. Really, yeah, random historical facts there. But yeah, it does most definitely happen. And especially when a lot of people do hand-to-hand transactions. Yep. I like to think everybody calls Derek up for their real estate needs, or at least uses a realtor. But there are a lot of hand-to-hand transactions, and our minimums are, we have to go back 42 years minimum. 30 years ago, they didn't do things this way necessarily, so it might have been a handshake agreement. Okay, that's great, but did you pay off the mortgage?
Mm-hmm. One of the things I was always surprised, I've been surprised with, is when things aren't reported. I mean, a lot of times it's easy stuff, but especially the lending side. Oh, this wasn't recorded with this credit bureau, or mortgage is not recorded here or there. And obviously, you guys take care of all that stuff. But as a consumer, not as a real estate agent, I always thought that stuff just was perfect. There weren't any problems. That things were reported like they were supposed to be and taken care of, and there weren't any questions. But it seems to happen more than I expected.
It's super common, actually. Yeah, and it's like, if you think how big some of these mortgage companies are, and unfortunately how big corporate conglomerates they are and all of that, they're focused on getting everybody to get a mortgage. They're not that focused on making sure everything was recorded properly for one they already got the money on. So it's not that they don't do it, it's that it's their lowest priority, essentially. Yeah. And that is extremely common for us to see, like, oh, there's a prior owner mortgage showing on your property. 9 times out of 10, it's the bank just never filed the release for it. So we have to get them to do so beforehand.
Yeah. Doing the legwork to make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And making sure they are, but when they're not, you guys step in and take care of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, because they're not all nice and clean. Sometimes there's major issues, sometimes there's not. And even like common name stuff, Chris Hamilton, There's a few of us in the counties around here. Some of them have some pretty bad liens. I know, because when I purchase and refi, it comes up often. So, but even when that happens, we can't assume anything. You say, oh, well, those aren't mine. Okay, not good enough. I'm going to need to call all those lien holders and verify that. And I think the other very important part of what we do in title here, too, is the escrow side of things. So there is millions of dollars being exchanged every day in this stuff. And even on a particular transaction, it's not just the bank getting a loan and a loan being paid off. It's, realtors work hard. They get paid too sometimes. We have to pay off a mortgage. We have to make sure the homeowner's insurance gets mailed into the right people. Oh, the condo association needs to be set up, so we got to do this. And we're that non-biased third party that's going to handle all that money and then disperse it appropriately, because real estate can be a sensitive thing. People get stuff too. So it's very reassuring to have a trusted, non-biased third party to handle all that stuff as well.
For sure.
And then we take the accountability of that then as well. So if a mortgage didn't get recorded, it's my fault.
Yep. It's and I think, one of the ways I explain real estate, like for listings and for buying a house, the internet has kind of given access to everybody. So I don't necessarily find houses for people like we used to, but listing a house, we take pictures, we market it, we do all that. And then there's the negotiation. But outside of that, it's almost like insurance. Like, you really don't need me, but once you need me, it's too late. When the house is on fire, you called me, you made your bed, now you got to live in it. But there are all those back end things like the escrow, and I think that's really the meat and potatoes of every transaction. That's what happens, and that's what I try to explain to people is they're the non-biased third party that handles things. Everything comes in, they sort through it, they filter it, and then it goes back out to the appropriate places, takes care of everything, and makes sure things are good. And then the title insurance is like insurance that, God forbid you need it, it's there, but hopefully you don't need it.
Yes.
And so that leads me into one of my big questions is, usually I say, hey, who do you want to use for title? What's title? What do they do? So most of the time, people don't even really understand what title is, how it plays a role in their transaction, anything. Do you have any recommendations for how? One of the things I always try to advocate for people in general is to be a more active participant in whatever your situation is.
Yes.
Don't be a unbiased third party that just sits around and is complacent and doesn't have a drive to handle their situation. So is there anything you can think of that could help people be a more active participant in making sure they have a successful, smooth transaction, transparency, honesty, anything like that?
Yeah, just be upfront and honest about everything. Again, Derek, I've known him 10 years. He does a great job. Like, a lot of realtors are even afraid to ask the question, hey, are you married?
Yeah.
Or like, hey, what are you doing with this money when we sell the house? Like, don't assume because they're working with another realtor, it's just doing this. You have to kind of know what's going on and ask a lot of questions up front. So just communicating on those things is so big. And I guess to be more active, to be more active, I think, honestly, just understanding a little bit of what it is, honestly. Because for us, for the consumer, we require proactive information. Because I'm going to have to order a payoff on your mortgage, check all this stuff. Like, give us proactive upfront information, and everything's and communicate ahead of time.
Because you're going to check the records, and it's going to come out one way or the other. The sooner it happens, the sooner it can be solved and not delay your transaction.
Exactly. And that's, I lost a little bit my train of thought of where I was going on that. But where I was going to is, like, Ohio is a dour state. I know that doesn't mean a lot to the people watching this, but it's one of, I think, 4 remaining ones in the country. And what that means is, if you own real estate, it doesn't matter if you bought it before you were married, after you were married, any of the above. The second you're married, unless it's in an LLC or trust, you're not selling it without your spouse's signature. So that's a big thing too. Sometimes we'll have a not so great realtor be proactive, and we'll get to a transaction and we'll find out they're married. And like, literally, we lost the deal about a month ago, and it was, yeah, he's in a foreign country, kind of. I think he was deported, actually, but it's like, we were 60 days into a contract getting ready to close. The realtor never even asked. So you got to be proactive and do those things. But because the dower is the big one. And don't ever assume, too, another like quick tip, I guess, to be involved. do not assume because an attorney prepared something that it was prepared right. Particularly being in real estate, we have attorneys come in that do totally different things, and they may not do it. And this is a technicality business. It's like, no, it wasn't transferred right. It's
Still doesn't count.
You know, it doesn't even count. So things have to be done a certain way, and that's a very common thing as well. Is they'll be like, yeah, well, they already had an estate planning attorney take care of everything, should be good, blah. And then as soon as we do the search, I'm like, no, this is wrong. Like, we can either do it again or it hasn't been done at all. Like, so, and it's not to knock any attorneys out there by any means, but it's like, check with the people that are going to be insuring that product actually, because they're the ones that need to dictate that a little bit. So, and we find that very common too. Like, if people have situations, if there's a probate situation, a death in the family, something like that, you're looking at probably 6 months minimum to get in a position to sell that house, unless there were certain things done prior to.
Gotcha. So I guess that's another thing. What's the biggest thing you run into in terms of deaths, and what do you see as the easy fix to being proactive?
So the biggest thing is survivorship language. When you get deeded a property, it's going to say, Chris and Stevie Hamilton, husband and wife. A good attorney that practices here in Columbus, Central Ohio at least, should know to add the words remainder to the survivor of them. That's what's called the survivorship deed. When you have that, that means if I pass away, no probate court is needed. My wife is going to inherit that property.
Straight in.
A lot of attorneys don't put survivorship language in there necessarily, or like maybe they don't understand, they don't review it. I don't know why, but that'll happen to where it's like, you literally could have added a sentence to the end of this deed and
saved a lot,
and saved thousands of dollars and months of time. And that's usually a stressful time. It's kind of like nobody wants to plan for death, but you see what people go through when that happens, and it's like, man, I don't want to do that to my kids or somebody like that. Like, kind of get it taken care of ahead of time so nobody else has to deal with that.
I'm just thinking, man, I had to check mine. I'm not even sure how mine's set up.
Yeah, and even like, and here's the thing too, like, I'm not going to knock any of our competitors, but like, there's title companies that will prepare them and not ask, or just like do it without it. You know, and it's like at closing, we're going to say like, hey, it's Chris and Stevie, and you got survivorship rights on there. That's what you want, right? And I'll explain to them usually what that means, because again, that's a big deal. And when I have to tell people sometimes that it's going to have to go through probate because that wasn't done, they're usually pretty upset with the prior person that prepared that.
Well, and not to go into age here, obviously that's one thing you expect at the end of life, but imagine being at our age and having something happen and trying to deal with young kids or whatever your situation. You know, obviously later in life, you might not have as much to handle or whatnot, but man, I couldn't imagine dealing with the nonsense of something like that on top of everything else at this stage of life. So
yeah, and again, like, that could create a real financial bear, that situation too, where it's like, maybe you need to sell the house right away, you need those funds, you have to move, that who knows what's going to happen. But it could be, 6 months, then we're going to go probate, and hopefully it'll, we'll get it resolved in 9 months. Like, I need that money now, that doesn't work. So definitely be proactive on that stuff.
Interesting. Here's another one for you.
Okay.
You can call somebody out if you want now.
All right.
So one of my favorite questions for title people, what's your biggest pet? I think I asked you this when we were golfing, maybe. Biggest pet peeve with real estate agents, or what's one thing real estate agents can do to be a better partner in the real estate transaction?
Be more considerate and give upfront communication. I'm very darn proud of my staff. I think I have the best staff there is. I'll put them up against anybody. They're only as good as the information they have. So I can tell you, I have 100 million% confidence in them if they're given that. But when people get rushed, that's when things don't happen. And a lot of times we will get, here's a contract, we need to close on Friday. And I can read the contract. It was in contract 3 weeks ago, and you didn't send that. So hey, it's kind of inconsiderate to put my amazing staff in that position and be like, all you had to do is hit a forward button. You know what I mean? We asked for very little. contract, all addendums, and contact info. If we have those things, this team I have does not fail. They will not. They will knock it out of the park. But even getting that sometimes can be a struggle.
Yep.
Or just, at the 11th hour, oh, yeah, here's the home warranty invoice. Oh, okay. I guess we'll change everything really quick before your people get here in 5 seconds. And even on the side of a closer, because I close a lot of the loans as well, I have a lot of confidence in that. And it means a lot to me that the people signing understand at least generally what's going on and have a good idea of that. I can rock that closing every time if I'm prepared. If I get it 10 minutes before that closing, and lenders will put us in that position too, we won't even do that because it's no, then I'm not a superstar closer.
Yeah.
Because I'm not prepared.
Well,
and that's when we might make a mistake.
But I think
we have to rush something.
The other part too that I get challenged with in this is, where did you start this conversation?
My staff?
No. Like the very beginning of this conversation. This is the biggest deal for most people.
Yeah, biggest transaction.
And so I'm amazed at how sometimes, the corny way to look at it, but it's true. Somebody one time, these are families sometimes, but these are people.
Yes.
Not files. And sometimes when things want to be rushed or forgotten or whatever, it's just kind of a big deal. And so it's amazing that professionals would and I've seen it plenty of times, and I've probably gone farther that direction than I'd like, but I think it can be taken more seriously and professional to treat this as a serious transaction and not 10 minutes. Maybe here's an example. So, and maybe you'll have some perspective on this, and this is probably going to be boring to anybody watching or listening. In the contract, we have loan commitment, however many days out.
Yes. And
then we have closing. To me, the idea of that is you have loan commitment, so you're sure the money's coming in. The sellers can pack, do their stuff, and take care of things, and they have some confidence that the deal's going to close.
Right.
But the times I feel like that I've set that buffer in there. Now, this is not including the last couple of years of craziness, because that's a whole nother story.
Sure.
But prior to that, you'd have a buffer in there for the sellers to pack and kind of do their thing and get out. Well, it seems like what always ended up happening, that buffer would get eaten up. Hey, we got it clear to close. Our loan's good to go. All right, let's move. Well, what's the point in that? Anyway, so I think even when there's buffer and patience built into these things, it's just interesting how often urgency comes in.
It is, and it's a lot of money's being exchanged. A lot of people are being paid, and it's we've seen it with lenders and even sometimes with realtors to where it's not necessarily right or ethical, but you can tell who really wants this transaction to close the most or probably needs that money the most. And I don't mean anything by that, because we all are out here trying to make it, but yeah, it's just not the best experience for sure.
And yeah, I think being able, and I fell victim to it early on, not really knowing any better, but just, oh yeah, let's rush this or change that, and not really fully grasping the severity of what it does for the people moving, and that takes a little bit of time to.
Yeah, and the consideration thing, we're kind of going back to that too, and it's the same thing. We've always been extremely flexible on our closings. We'll close anytime, anywhere, and if that means you need us to come to your house at 9:00 at night, we'll do that. Now, we had to dial that back a little bit, because we were doing that. We'd go out to people's to do a refi at 8:00 at night, and they'd been sitting there since 2:00 on the couch getting a buzz on. And it's okay, the buzz is a whole different issue, but the issue is I could have done this during business hours. This is not a convenience thing. That is a thing. That's a service out of necessity that we're happy to do, but you don't just take advantage of it for the heck of it because you can. That costs us a lot more money to do that stuff.
Partially the world we're in. I do what I want. And
yeah.
Another story, but
yeah.
Consideration, definitely an important thing.
Yeah, and in all things too, because it can get tensious with all this stuff too, the perspective of okay, there's people on the other side of this too, and this is what they're going through, and there's a domino effect. A deal potentially not closing is going to mess up 10 other deals not closing or delay them at least. That's kind of the unfortunate way it works. So but again, your perspective then there's really good of there needs to be a reason to rush. And I think it's almost because it's a lending thing, a way for them to get it up. Oh, we're ready to close in 15 days, but okay, why? Why?
Yep.
I would rather what we're doing here is very serious. No, take the 30. I would rather you take the 30. Now, again, if I have to move and do X, Y, and Z, like that's fine. But yeah, there's always a rush in this industry, and I don't quite understand that unless it's coming from buyers or sellers specifically.
Who it should be, yeah. And a lot of, especially with certain clients that I know good enough, and ones that I feel like I can say it to, but I'll try to help maybe alleviate some future stress and tension by saying this is an emotional thing. A lot of people want to treat it as math, and they're savvy investors and they want to have an asset and blah, 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 and all that stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, to me, it's a roof over your head. It's where your memories, blah, 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 all that warm and fuzzy stuff. But because of all that warm and fuzzy stuff, it can be emotional. And a lot of times I've had a few clients that'll get to that emotional spot and they'll say, this is what you were talking about. And at that point, I'll go back to bold, where emotion leads to motion is one of the things they said there. And people act differently when they get into that tense or energetic, whatever emotional state, and they make some interesting decisions, or they take what's done as an aggression to them when it's just the other side protecting themselves. And then that can create that conflict or tension or urgency that then changes everything. So that's part of our job, is to keep that at bay and take care of.
Yeah.
But let's try to dumb this down for the people that have no idea if 21 minutes in, if anybody is still listening to this that isn't, doesn't love this kind of stuff. And maybe this can be a clip for social media or something. But anyway, a dumbed down version of, outside of title insurance and protecting assets and blah, blah, blah. As my cousin used to say, tell it to me like I'm 4. Like, what's the breakdown? So let's say somebody gets into contract, buyer, seller, whatever. I mean, I'll include a joke from my risk management teacher in college. He got a law degree. And he said, when I walked into my first courtroom, nobody had ever taught me, do I sit on the left or the right? Plaintiff, defendant, who sits where? And his joke was just, there's a lot of stuff they don't teach you in school.
Right.
So let's say it's somebody that has no idea, like you come to a closing table and, what are the little things that people can expect outside of all the big nonsense that might be over?
Yeah, and I guess that's maybe like some of the funner side of things that we get to do in this industry. And it even piggybacks on kind of the things you were saying too, of like this industry can get transactional. Like there is one of our core values is there's a family behind every file, So like we want to not get caught up in the transactional part of that and remember that. So, and I guess the fun part of that is like we perform the actual closing. So, and that's what a way to look at it as well is you're going to come here, sign these papers. We're going to make sure you sign them and understand them. But on top of that too, like we don't take it lightly. It's a big deal. I've seen, now don't get me wrong. I've done closings for wealthy investors that I could have slapped them across the face in the middle of the closing. It was probably their $10th million transaction of the day. But on the opposite side of that, I've seen people, foreigners that have never owned a home, and there'll be 5 people in that closing room with tears in their eyes, and like I'll get emotional thinking about it. Like I'm right there with them because it's like it's a life-changing moment for those people, and it's like the home ownership is so big, like for the mental health and like just American dream aspect of everything, quite honestly, like it's a big deal. So like getting away from the transactional side, we want it to be a celebration. I want you to crack a beer or some champagne after your closing and have a toast. You just bought a house, for crying out loud, you know what I mean? Or if you just sold your house, even like, hey, that's a big check. Let's celebrate that. So having people that care head up that transaction and treat it as a celebration is like a big deal, I guess. So that's kind of the more of the non-technical side of things that we get to do. That's really fun, actually. And then just build the relationships with people through that too, because, and even with people like you, in this industry is I am ultimately in sales, and that's what I set out to do unapologetically. But man, I've developed some really good relationships and people, and that's the older you get, that's the more important stuff at the end of the day anyhow, honestly. Yep. So I guess like a one maybe quick tip might be to when you're thinking about, or if you're in a selling position, is where are the funds going? That's something we talked about too. Just as far as assumptions, a very particular thing is us. We can only send money to the entity that's selling it. A lot of people will say, Derek's selling his house. Oh, send it to Derek Schwyn, LLC. And it's like, that's a different entity. So if you get into a trust or an estate where there was a death or something like that, a lot of times I'll tell people, like, here's a check, and they don't even have a bank account for the trust for it. And it's like, we're proactive about that. But I guess just think of that stuff ahead of time to try to address it as much as possible, because we definitely don't want to find out in the 11th hour. So, and work with a good realtor is my biggest piece of advice. In the 10 years I've been doing this, I don't know if I'll get an award or in big trouble for saying this. Like, I don't know that I had a lot of respect for what realtors did prior to coming into this industry, of probably like the perception of everybody else. And it is tough because I know a lot of you probably haven't had good experiences. And that's kind of the number one reason realtors have this bad reputation. But it's a lot like any other industry. You know, there's probably 10 to 20% of the people doing 90% of the business. And those people are pretty great. They're pretty awesome. So it's easy to do that. So it's not a negative thing for like, it's the professional. So like vetting, that's a big deal. I'm not knocking social media. Don't pick your realtor from social media. Like, I would like get a referral or something like that, because all the flash and all that stuff's great. But sincerity, because here's what I'll tell you. Every realtor looks good on a smooth transaction. When it goes smoothly, like I've never seen anybody look bad.
You don't need me until you need me.
Exactly. But when it does, that's when you're just going to look so bad, or like be like called out, kind of like how bad you did or missed on this or whatever. So like, it's, I know I'm getting on a segue here, but like, it's just the importance of working with a good realtor, and about like, you need to know what you're doing and be a craftsman of your trade. But my perception of doing this is the care factor is a way better intangible than like sales, quite honestly, because it's okay. Again, that's great. You sold 100 houses. I really need somebody, and it's 9:00 at night. Are you going to answer the phone or like get me through this or that? Like,
well, and I think also there's a lot of, and it's somewhat been a theme of this conversation, the prep and the participate, like being an active participant, having the care, like a coach used to say, I'm going to confront you in a caring way.
Yeah.
To have those honest conversations. And a lot of people aren't going to go into the awkward, are you married? Are you not? Are you divorced or whatever? But those questions can mean things later on. And that's a lot of what this job is.
And that's what I tell them. I'm like, okay, well, you can feel awkward asking that question, or you can be the person who never gets a referral or repeat business from them because you look like
embarrassed,
or embarrassed yourself by not doing something that could have been easily fixed.
That's kind of been my general thing when I put social media content out, just to say, like, be an active participant, participate with somebody, build a relationship, have connections that you know somebody's going to take care of you, and have those conversations and do whatever those things are. Because again, a lot of times when it's too late, that's when it gets stressful and challenging and whatnot. If you have the conversations, if you have the rapport built already, and people understand what's going on and they're engaged, things work a whole lot smoother and taken care of.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So definitely some value there. But most people aren't going to do that. That's just how things go.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just echo that too with lending as well, because I'm sure you talk about that and tell everybody as well, but just get a good local person that cares. Try to stay away from the big guys unless there's a great product or an incentive there. Would be my advice on stuff like that as well.
Yep. Because most of the time the big guys, it seems that they'll tell you what you can afford, not what you should afford. There's a big difference. Can be a big difference.
Yeah. And that whole experience thing that we talked about, again, like, it's a special thing. It's a big deal. Like, we want it to be a positive experience and not one done through a portal online, kind of, you know what I mean? You know,
and I also feel like there is the sales pitch of, it's like anything else. You work local, you support local, and you're supporting your neighbors, your friends, and, you know, I think it was Chad Hoffman with Richwood Bank at a presentation last month said, it's in like their rule book that if they will spend, I think it was like 10% more if somebody's local.
Oh,
just to spend money local.
That's really cool.
Yeah, you know, and I'm like that with a lot of things.
Yeah, same.
Depending on what it is, that I'd rather give a buddy or somebody I like there's some coffee shops in town that I make sure to go to them before Starbucks. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I got a buddy who owns a gas station, so I try to get gas at his gas station. And, there's some of that kind of stuff of I'd rather that than have my money go to who knows where.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, well, closing thoughts on that? Or anything
I don't
else?
think so. I should add, if you close at Heart of Gold, we spin vinyl records here. So
I was going to say,
kind of a big deal. I'm kind of a music guy, so we probably have about, 300 or 400 vinyls for you to choose from when you're here. So you can get your own theme song to your closing. You can start thinking now, what are you going to play when you get the keys to the house? Let me know. I'll make sure we got a vinyl ready for you.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
I know you've done that, but I didn't think about it in terms of a theme song for your closing.
Yeah, or like sometimes I mess around like, all right, like, what do you want to hear? Most of the time we're just playing whatever. I'm like, hey, what do you want to listen to when you buy this baller house that you're so excited about? Yeah.
Say, do you have any buddies come in that close or anything? You put on some sarcastic song to be funny?
Yeah. There's a little bit of that going on.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for
you.
the wisdom you've imparted on myself and others. If you guys ever have title questions, wealth of knowledge here, Heart of Gold Title. I'll have all the connections and everything down below.
Yes, absolutely. We're locally owned, family owned. Me and my brother own it. So, love to help you out if you can do anything. And obviously want to recommend Derek as well for your real estate needs. Make sure you're hitting him up. Got a pretty good team here.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for listening. If you guys are still here 30 minutes later, appreciate you tuning in and paying attention. Excuse me. Right in the middle of, I thought I had it. All right. Thanks for paying attention, listening to us talk. If you have any suggestions on content you want to see later on, anybody you think I should talk to, or if I should talk to you, I'd love to have you. Like this video if you do, subscribe if you haven't, do all the things. And if there's anything we can do for you, love to connect. Until next time, take care.
All right.